Hey, everybody, and welcome to the first ULF podcast. I'm Michael Urbina.
I'm Karla Verma.
I'm Gadiel Rosario.
So we're the three attorneys here at the Urbina law firm, and we started the podcast with the idea of doing something, first of all, in English, because pretty much everything that we do is in Spanish with English subtitles, but also to talk about different subjects that would be maybe a little less, individually intense and more still topic related to what we do, but maybe something more relevant to what's on the news or something like that without necessarily getting too excessively political, because most of you listen to this in your car or in your relaxing time and you don't want to hear about different hot topics that may make your blood boil or feel some other different way. So we figured that a good topic that we've never really fully talked about, but it's something that I think can interest all, is the topic of the change in the law and immigration reform and that possibility, And the reality is that I believe it is something that, no matter where you stand on immigration, you should support, because the reality is that immigration reform is for something that, for the law to actually change. There's been plenty of policy changes over the years, over the different administrations, but the actual law itself has not changed since 1996. So what happens is you have all these archaic laws, some of them going back to the 60s, the 50s, the 70s, the 80s, that have not changed, because even in 1996, it wasn't an entire reform of the law. It was just certain sections were added or slightly changed, but most of the other reliefs really kind of stayed the same. I mean, it's not reliefs, but subsections, whatever you want to call it. So this is probably one of the oldest, most archaic, and most, you can kind of think about going through a labyrinth and not understanding where you're going or how you can get to the cheese. Let's put it that way. And that's where we stand right now. So regardless of where you stand in the law, or in the aisle with regards to whether you want there to be more enforcement or you want them to be more liberal about the people that, can get visas or green cards, you should want to change in the law, because the reality is that it should benefit every single issue that pops up in immigration today, So that's the topic of today. So I will each talk about our opinions on different subjects, and, you guys feel free to send us comments whether you like it or not, after you hear this podcast. So what do you guys think about this?
I think that right now we are in a dam that's breaking, and we're basically trying to fix it with Band-Aids. That's essentially what these policy changes or regulation changes are, without fixing what the real problem is, which is immigration laws.
I agree. And I think I always tell people that I see immigration as let's pretend that you're looking at the under part of your sink where all the tubes and all that stuff are, and that you have a leak on that sink. And what's happening right now is people are just trying to mop up the floor from the leak, but nobody's fixing the leak. So the leak is still there, causing all the problems and all the damage and all the issues in your house or in your kitchen, but you just keep mopping it instead of just actually fixing the leak, which in this, scenario or story, whatever you want to call it, is the actual law. The law is what's causing all this problem, is what's causing, more people to cross over illegally, more people get angry about the lack of enforcement. All these things, go back to the one source, which is the law, and that's the problem, So you can try to enforce the law all you want, but that's really, the law is actually the reason that's causing all the other problems. So until you fix that leak, like you said, not with Band-Aids, but actually rebuilding the dam or whatever, you're never going to solve all the issues that we have really in immigration right now.
Yes, what my concern with immigration reform is that, this has to start in the legislature, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is that what I see is that it's such a toxic topic, meaning that you can go wrong with any particular group of society, because there's no agreement between different parties, different sections of the population. So I think in part, many of the politicians are scared of going into a deep immigration reform, because it could cost them votes. It could cost them their seat in the legislature. And in some points, it's like, let's just better leave it like that. And it's just a topic for the elections, basically, and a way to attack the other party, which we're seeing all the time in the news with Trump, immigration reform, but we have to stop this, we have to stop that. And then the Democrats, oh no, we want to, we need better laws. So better laws, everything is so generic that what are better laws? What is the correct legal way to immigrate to the United States? Those are the topics that I don't think anybody really has an answer to, or would put their livelihood or their legislature seat on the brink of losing it.
Yeah.
I agree. On that same topic, I think that is a problem. Nowadays, it's so politically charged and people are so opposite on the ends of it that nobody can say, hey, let's just come to an agreement on things. They're refusing to agree. That's the whole reason why the government shut down.
Exactly.
Like, it's to the point where there is not one thing that they can agree on. So that's why nobody wants to take on that dirty diaper. Exactly. Everybody's like, I'm just going to pass it along.
Kick the can down the road. And
exactly.
Yeah, that's true. The government
else.
was recently closed because of that issue.
And that wasn't the first time.
That wasn't the first time. But then, how do you fix that? What do you really want?
And I think the main issue is that, from my point of view, is that nobody on either side or nobody on either position really understands the law and the complexities of it. You hear this, you need to get in line to get this. Newsflash, there is no line. I've never been on a line like the Visa Priority Bulletin where you can literally wait 20 years and be like, next in line, and all of a sudden there's it retrogressed and you're back to the back of the line. Like, where does that happen? That happens in Burger King right now. There's going to be some shots fired. Like, you see what I mean? It's only in immigration where, think about it. It's true. It's true. If you wait in line, like there's 20 people ahead of you, went in line and you're about to get whatever, your Whopper or whatever it is you're getting, and somebody tells you, nope, you're back to the line, like there's going to be a riot, Mm-hmm. So in immigration, you can wait 20 years in the so-called visa bulletin thinking that you're about to be next in line. And all of a sudden they're like, no, wait, actually you're back of the line again. And it starts all over, or maybe it goes back further. And people could wait an entire lifetime thinking they're in line, and there is no line. The line is an imaginary thing because the visa bulletin doesn't work that way. It works in...
It's so fluid.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you almost have a better chance of winning the lottery than certain categories of the visa bulletin.
You mean the literal visa lottery? Or
no, like the actual Mega Millions lottery. Because when you think about some of the categories like the Philippines and Mexico have, that's never going to be current if you start a petition right now. Like, never, ever, in reality. Because you tell people, it's like, your wait's going to be 30 years, but that's not going to happen because it's going to keep retrogressing. When it hits 2001, it's going to retrogress like 10,000 times.
And not just that, they change if you get married. Like, you have to not marry. You can't do certain things if you want to keep that same priority. It goes...
Yeah, and in some cases, if you get married, you're not in any line. You forfeit everything, So you almost put your entire life on hold for the
possibility.
Yeah, for the possibility that maybe someday that becomes current, and it doesn't. So again, when I hear people talk about the so-called line, there is no line. It does not exist. It is something imaginary. Granted, some people like immediate statuses or some of the categories that move more fluidly, then yeah, sure. But for the most part, the rest are nonsensical, non-existent, and something that's not workable. It wasn't workable back then, and it definitely isn't workable now. And that is the same problem that causes people then to just come to the border or try to do things the other way because they know that their whole life could be spent on trying for this possibility, and it's never going to happen, So we go back to the same problem. Where does the problem lie? In the law, because the law is really what's causing illegal immigration, and the law is what's causing all these people that want more enforcement to be angry because, Gadiel mentioned earlier, he said that most of the reliefs, afforded by, the 1996 Act and before, you have to be here to be able to apply for that. So how are you going to apply for that unless you're here? So again, it almost encourages illegal immigration.
And not just that.
Exactly.
The the people coming in 1996 are not the same amount of people coming in 2019.
Correct.
The numbers that were allotted back then make no sense right now.
And they've never been updated at all. There again, all these policy changes that happen are more like, different ways of wiping the table or cleaning the dishes, but nothing has changed in terms of, hey, use a dishwasher to wash your dishes. Like, that's essentially what's happening now. They keep changing how to clean the dishes, but not necessarily how to do it more efficiently or more up to, our current standards.
The second thing is all the delays. They don't even have the staff to handle any of the regulation or policy changes. So that might be another reason that they're hesitant to change the law.
Correct.
They don't want to expand things. They want to control it with the same amount of people that they had back in 1996.
Yeah, it's true.
So when I think about immigration reform, so everybody should be up for it, right? That's what we think or want to think. But towards what would be the reform? Towards the way I see it, unless you try to do a gray-ish area instead of black and white, what I see is immigration reform towards more benefits or towards more restrictions. Because you could say that for example, the Republican Party would want a reform for more restrictions, making it more difficult for people to come to the United States, which is no secret. That's what our president mentions all the time. He wants more restrictions. That's the attack on asylum that's happening right now, and many other changes that he's implementing through case law and through policies. But then you have the left, the Democrats, that want more benefits, like DACA, more benefits for DACA, open it up again for new DACA applications or more time for renewals. So I'm guessing we're gonna have to get to a happy medium. But the real question is there really a happy medium that can be met? Should the champion of that be the president or the legislature or an independent commission that is assigned?
I think that possibly the happy medium would be expanding the ways for legal migration. I think that would be something that both sides would agree on. That doesn't necessarily mean benefits for undocumented aliens here in the U.S. or restrictions for undocumented aliens, but it just opens the gates for people to do it legally, which is the problem right now. As we were talking, there are more people trying to get in now than there were in 1996, and that's why those allotted numbers don't make sense. That's the reason that people have to, I guess, lose their patience and come in illegally, because the legal way is taking so long, or it's so difficult. There's so many obstacles that are nonsensical because of archaic laws, that I think a happy medium would be expanding the way to legally migrate to the U.S.
I agree. I agree with that, because what we were talking earlier about, basically the law encouraging illegal immigration has to, that has to be attended by the lawmakers.
They have to update the laws.
Exactly, because, basically the incorrect way to get into the United States under the current law can get you into the correct pathway of
faster,
even faster many times.
Exactly.
So that really doesn't make any sense. Because what I see in the news is usually a simplification of the issues in two parts. Basically, people who want more immigrants to be able to be legal in the United States, which is what we're talking about. And then people who doesn't want more immigrants under the pretext of they can come, but through the legal correct way. But that's the thing, when you talk about the legal way, probably the legal way is 10% or max 20% of the entire pie of how to become a resident, a legal resident in the United States. So what are we really talking about the correct way? I really hate when people say that on the news, because it really doesn't make any sense, especially if you're an immigration attorney. because that's, what is the correct way that you have a son in, how do you have a spouse in the United States that is a citizen that you have never been here? Yes, K visa, things like that, but that's less than 1% of the cases that you see.
And that's a good point. Again, this is why the laws need to change, because nowadays we have internet, we have Facebook, we have means of getting to know people without having to be in the same country.
Right.
And that is what the laws don't account for. When you get asked for proof, it's proof of stuff that you can have together. You really don't need to have stuff together to know someone via Facebook or to know someone pen pals, things like that.
That's a very good point.
And I think, it's a good point that you mentioned. Obviously, that's becoming more of a global culture, because aside from getting to know each other and everything, if you look at it also from the quote unquote enforcement part of it, it is still mind boggling to me that there is no form, technology or any sort that tracks people that come in with a visa and whether they left or not. So,
because those are the people that they don't really care about. Those are the good people.
But that's
they're doing it legally.
Well, think about it this way. So, study after study after study shows that the reality is that most of the people that are in the United States without status didn't really come in illegally. They came in legally, whether to a tourist visa because they wanted to come go to Disney World, or they wanted to come visit a friend or whatever, and then they were like, you know what? I like it here. I'm going to stay. But because there is no way of tracking whether they actually left or not, like you can come and go, you could stay here, and 20 years later, they're like, oh wait.
But I mean, there is a way. Left. They're just not enforcing it, because you get those I-94 cards that say you need to turn this in when you leave.
But again, they don't have a system. There's no system. That's for
the honor
DHS.
System.
It's literally the honor system. Exactly. Like DHS has no way of tracking whether those were actually turned in or not. That's my point. So in a world where we live, where you have biometrics, we have facial recognition software, you have all these things, and you're telling me that we still depend on people turning in their I-94 when they depart. Like, a lot of people will tell you, like, well, I actually used to send that in by mail, and they were like, oh, you left, good for you. Like, but the person never left. So it again, it goes back to my initial point. Like, no matter where you stand, I mean, it's everybody should be wanting
things need to
a change, because whether you want more enforcement, things are not going to work the way they are. If you want more, visas to be issued or more people to be granted relief, you want things to change. Because again, nothing's going to change with that until you start changing that actual law. It's just, to me, is really that simple. Now, in terms of a happy medium, what that looks like, that's where it gets murky, I just think it has to be like a balancing effect in terms of maybe literally a give and take on each point. Okay, so we're going to be a little more generous with visas, but we're going to implement a system where we can track them better to see if somebody's leaving, not leaving, how we can keep up with them and whatnot, and so on and so forth with regards to the positions too. Because to me, like, consular process is the biggest waste of time on the face of the earth, especially the way it is right now. Like, you're making someone go abroad to complete an interview that you could have completed here, but you're literally doing that almost as like a punishment. Be like, okay, so go over there and complete it and then come back in a few days. Really? Like, just because they didn't come in legally, like, just get over it. Make them do a waiver so they can do it here or something like that. So you can already waive the 10-year bar, but you can't just go ahead and be like, yeah, just go ahead and adjust after the waiver's approved. It makes no sense whatsoever. And instead of having them go pay the doctors for the medical exam over there, you ask them to pay the doctors over here, and you help the economy here. Exactly. So again, it's so antiquated that you're like sending money away just for the sake of do it the right way. Like, it's almost like, go back, do it again, and this time do it right. Even though everything's approved, you're good to go, but just go back and cross over legally. So you learn the lesson. Like, it makes no sense. And you're giving money away, and you're wasting time and resources on things that just to like prove a point. So I think, again, I don't know what a happy medium will look like. We can sit here. That could be a completely separate podcast in terms of our proposals for immigration reform. But I just think that it almost has to be like a point by point, like give, take on both sides. But until that happens, we're still going to have the same problem.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. But it has happened. They've not in a level of law reform, but for example, the government shutdown was they tried to negotiate basically, but it didn't go nowhere. It was, give me the wall, and then the Democrats were saying, well, give us the DACA.
It was just a big
kids.
tug of war.
A tug of war. But I actually thought it was gonna be granted, DACA extensions or extending the program for the wall, but they didn't. It didn't happen
Because it was more about people's pride than it was
Exactly.
about immigration reform.
So that's another subsection to give it a name, or another thing to consider in those negotiations and everything that goes into it, because it's not like criminal reform. It's because everybody agrees that if you kill somebody, you have to go to jail. If you break the law, you have to go to jail or pay a fine. You have to pay your dues to society. So that's a pretty easy starting point.
Yeah.
But here it's not the same thing, because also there's the racial issue where so the southern border is the one that will have all of these limits, a lot of these restrictions. And then, who are the people coming, from the entering the south border? Not Europeans, of course. And that goes to the point that many of the people who get here legally through a tourist visa, for example, an overstay, they are not the enemy, because the people down south, they are the enemy. They're invading the United States, but those are the overstay don't. So it's difficult to see the way that two things are measured is the same thing without the same result. So people feel you're being discriminated upon, and then that changes everything, because then your dignity, that's something that you don't give up easily, and you should never give up easily. But I think those are the main obstacles for the immigration reform. But the crazy thing is that even though you get here legally through a tourist visa, for example, you become illegal once you overstay. So saying you have to come the right way, the legal way, it's a
dream.
Exactly. It's something. It's an echo. It doesn't exist. It doesn't make any sense. In some situations it can happen, but that's not. You can't rely only on that to address all of the issues that we're seeing, because people are not gonna stop coming to the United States. That's just a fact. Same as drugs are gonna keep on coming into the United States. As long as there's demand,
there will be supply.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to end today's podcast because we don't want to get into a whole drug debate here, That's, again, a whole different subject. But hopefully, our conversation today enlightened you a little bit, kind of showed you some of the pros and cons and issues really that are with the current law and why really everybody should kind of want to push for that. We're not trying to be particularly political or anything like that. We're just trying to, raise the point with regards to that, there is common ground to be found. And I hope that both sides finally sit down and realize that
it's not about them, it's about the people.
And you can't solve, you can't solve the problem. You can't get one without the other. You can't get enforcement without being a little, giving a little bit, and vice versa. You're not going to get the entire pie. You have to split it, share it, and figure it out, because we're all in this together. It's still the United States. We're, it's a nation made of immigrants. It's always going to be a nation made of immigrants, period, no matter how you look at it. So let's figure it out. Let's figure out a way to make it work and move past this, because at this point it's just a waste of time and resources for everybody involved and just causes a lot of heartache and pain. So with that, we end the podcast. Hopefully you guys liked it. We're going to try to do this a little more, bring different topics and do it in English without necessarily having, Spanish subtitles or anything like that. If you guys have any topics that you guys want us to address, for some of our next episodes, feel free to write us a message, leave us a comment on this. Other than that, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Have a good